Okay, here we are in chapter 2 on the integers. This is section 2.6 on solving equations involving integers. So as with whole numbers, we can produce equivalent equations by adding and subtracting the same values from each side of an equation and not change the solution. So for addition, if we start out with a equals b, then what we can do is we can add this c to both sides of the equation and then produce the equivalent equation. So c is some integer and we can add it to both sides and it gives us an equivalent equation. Subtraction works the same way. We can subtract c from both sides and have an equivalent equation as well. Now, when we do that, we're going to end up with a solution. And then those solutions, what we need to do is we need to check them. So this is kind of like a check to see if that really satisfies this equation. So is -4 a solution? Well, -4, that's meaning this says is x equal -4 a solution, even though it just says is -4, because the only place we can plug -4 in is there. And so what we do is we take 8 minus, and then we have a 2 times -4, and that's supposed to equal 5. Now we have -2 times a -4. That's going to be minus times a minus is plus. So we have 8 plus 8 equals 5. So 16 equals 5. Now is that true? No, that's not true. So that is not a solution. So we can say not a solution. Okay, so that means when you were solving this equation, when you got down to the final answer, you've done something wrong along the way because that is not a solution. All right, so this is what we're coming to, showing the check after we solve the equation. And again, all we're doing is adding or subtracting the same thing from both sides. So what do we have here? Well, we have x plus 9 equals -11. We want to solve for x. So let's subtract 9 from both sides. So x equals -11 minus 9. So they're both the same sign. So we can just add. So that's a 0 for 10. Add 1. That's a 2. And our sign is negative. So that's what we're saying our solution is. Now, does it work? Does -20 plus 9 equal -11? Well, now that just means we take 20 minus 9, borrow 1. 10 minus 9 is 1. 1 minus 0 is 1. Sign of the larger was negative, so -11 equals -11. That checks. And so, you can label and say that's a check, or as long as you show the check somewhere, that would be the ideal way to do it. And make sure you do your subtraction and addition right. So maybe you did something wrong here, but when you do stuff over here, you actually do it right, and you're like, hey, it doesn't work. Then don't just try to force it to work. Make sure you've done the work everywhere correct. And so if it doesn't work in one place, go back and check and see, what did I do wrong there? And then maybe you'll find your problem, and then you'll get the correct answer. All right, so with this one here, what do we do? So what we're going to do is we're going to basically add 2 to both sides. Now when we do that on the left side, the 2's cancel and we get x equals. Now -7 plus 2, well, that's basically 7 minus 2, which is 5. The sign of the larger is that, so it's going to be a -5. So that's what we say the answer is. Now let's check it. A -5 minus 2 equals -7. Well, that's -5 plus a -2, and that's a -7 equals -7. So that one checks as well. Now this one, we have a little bit more work to do because before we can subtract, what we have to do is we have to multiply this. So we'll multiply that, we'll add that, and then we can get to the stage where we have one thing on the left and one on the right. So we do that, we have y. Now this is 2 times a -4. Well, that's going to give us a -8. And here we have a -8 plus 6, so we can take 8 minus 6, that's 2. The sign is going to be negative. Okay. Now, let's add 8 to both sides. So that cancels. We get y equals, now 8 minus 2, that's 6. So that's what we say our answer is. Now let's check it. 6 plus 2 times a -4 equals -8 plus 6. And you always want to go back to your original equation because maybe the next time when you're doing this, if you had made a mistake adding or subtracting anywhere over here, hopefully you won't do it again in the second time, and then that's when the check actually works. So this becomes 6 minus 8 equals minus 8 plus 6. Well, you know, if you look at that, that's a 6, that's a 6, that's a minus 8, that's a minus 8. Looks like it's going to probably work. So minus 2 equals minus 2, and it does check out. All right, as with whole numbers, we can also produce equivalent equations by multiplying and dividing by the same side on each, same amount on each side. So for multiplication, multiply both sides of the equation by the same quantity C, and the solution set does not change. So if we start with A equals B, if we multiply by a C on both sides, now C cannot equal 0, then we're going to have an equivalent equation. Now dividing works the same way. We divide both sides of the equation by the same quantity C again. The solution set does not change. So if we start with A equals B, we can divide by C. Again, C cannot equal 0. Here it really cannot equal 0 because we can't divide by 0. And then we have equivalent equations. So two really basic ones here. We have a negative 4z equals negative 28. Well, how do we get rid of that negative 4? Well, here, remember, it's multiplied. So to get rid of it, we have to divide. So we divide here and we divide here. Now those cancel and become 1, so we get z equals. Now negative divided by negative is positive, and then 4 goes into 28 how many times? Well, 4 times 7 is 28, and so we end up with a positive 7. Now does that work for the check? Negative 4 times 7 equals negative 28. Well, negative 4 times a positive 7 is negative 28, and so that one checks. Now when we divide initially the variable, whatever it is, t divided by 3, how do we get rid of that 3? Well, we have to multiply by that variable. So when we do that, the 3's will cancel, but we also have to multiply this by 3. So on this side, that cancels that. We get t equals. Now 11 times 3 is 33, but we have a negative, so it's a negative 33. And so that would be our solution. Now, if we take negative 33 divided by 3, does that equal a negative 11? Well, now we have to take 3 into 33, and we're just worried about the no signs here. That means it's going to be a negative when we have a negative divided by a positive. So 3 goes into 3 once. We have a 3, subtract that 0, bring down our 3. 3 goes in that once. That's 3, subtract, we get 0. And so we do get negative 11 equals a negative 11. Now, what happens if we get several operations together, okay? So if we're combining multiplication and addition or division and subtraction or something, what we have to do to solve that equation is we have to do PEMDAS in reverse. So in other words, we're going to do subtracting and adding first, then we're going to do the multiplication and division next, and then usually that's the biggest extent of what we have to do, and then exponents and parentheses, depending on how they fall into place, they'll take a consideration. But usually we only are worried about those first four when we're doing these. All right, so when we have this, we have x divided by 2 plus 6 equals 4. So that means we have to do subtraction and addition first. So let's do this. Let's subtract 6 from both sides first. When we do that, those cancel. We get x over 2 equals. Now we have a negative 6 plus 4, so opposite signs. So we take the larger minus the smaller. 6 minus 4 is 2. The sign is going to be negative, so negative 2. Now we're on to, well, this is division here, so if we multiply by that denominator, those will cancel, but what you do on that side, you also have to do on that side. So here we get x equals negative 4, okay? That looks good, so let's say we plug this back into here and see what we get. Negative 4 divided by 2 plus 6 equals 4. Well, here 4 divided by 2 is 2. It's negative, so negative 2 plus 6 equals 4. 6 minus 2 is 4, so that checks. So negative 4 is our solution. Okay. Here we have 0 equals 9 plus 3r. Okay, well, what do we do here? We have numbers here, number here, and variable with a product here. So let's subtract 9 from both sides because we want to get that variable by itself. So when we do that, those are gone. On the right, we get 3r. On the left, we get -9. Now we know that since this is a product here, to get the opposite of that, to get rid of it, we have to divide by that 3. And so when we divide by 3, we just get r equals. Now 9 divided by 3 is 3, but we have that negative sign, so it's a -3 is what r is equal to. Now, does that check? Well, let's plug it back in. 0 equals 9 plus 3 times -3. Well, 0 equals 9, and 3 times -3 is -9. Well, 9 minus 9 is 0, so it checks. All right, so what do we got over here? Well, we've got a division, and then we have the subtraction, and then we have an addition over here. So let's do what's over here first, okay? So that gives us q over -2 minus 9 equals. Now we have opposite signs, so we can take the larger 8 minus the smaller 3. 8 minus 3 is 5. Now what's the sign going to be? It's going to be negative. Okay. Now let's do and get rid of this 9. So let's add 9 to both sides. So those cancel. We get q over -2 equals. Now 9 minus 5. Well, 9 minus 5 is 4. So that was pretty easy. So now we have to solve for this q. So how do we get rid of that? Well, that's q divided by -2. So to get rid of that, you have to do the opposite. So you multiply by a -2 because -2 divided by a -2 is 1. And so those cancel and we just get q. But remember, what we do on this side, we have to do on this side as well. So 4 times a -2 is -8. Now let's look. So we have a -8 divided by -2 minus 9 equals -8 plus 3. Well, here we have a negative divided by negative, so that's positive. 8 divided by 2, well, that's 4 minus 9 equals -8 plus 3. Well, here we have opposite signs. Here we have opposite signs. So we can take the larger minus the smaller. So 9 minus 4 is 5. The sign of the larger is negative, so that's going to be a -5. Here we take 8 minus 3 is 5. The sign of the larger is negative, so -5 equals -5. That works, and so -8 is our solution. All right, what do we do here? Well, here we have -6x minus 14 equals 4, so we have to get rid of that 14 first. So we have -6x equals, and then we have 4 plus 4 is 8 and 1, so we have 18. Now here we're multiplying by a -6, so the kind of the opposite of that, it's going to be divide by the -6. So we do that, and those cancel. We get x equals positive divided by negative is negative, and 6 goes into 18. Well, 6 times 3 is 18, and so it's a -3 is our solution. Now, does that make sense as far as a check? Well, -6 times -3 minus 14 equals 4. Well, 6 times 3 is 18. That negative times negative is positive, so we have 18 minus 14 equals 4. 18 minus 14 is 4, so that does check out. All right, what about here? Well, we have a product and an addition, so we need to first subtract that off. All right, so when we do that, that's gone. We have minus 14x equals minus 70. Now we'll divide by -14. So that disappears. We get x equals. Now, negative divided by negative is positive, and 14 goes into 70 how many times? Well, if we take this times 5, that's going to be 20. That's 70. So it looks like x is equal to 5. Okay. Now, whenever you're doing these, if you have trouble, look at your number here, the 4, and think about, is there anything that's going to multiply by 4 to give us a 0? Well, you can multiply by 0. You could take 4 times 5 would give us a 0, and 4 times 10 would give us a 0. So, well, if we multiply by 0, that doesn't really work. 5 did work, but what if we did 10? Well, 10 times that's going to be 140, so that's twice as big as it needs to be, and so that 5 really is the only one that works. So now we do our check. Minus 14 times 5 plus 10 equals negative 60. Well, 14 times 5, well, we found out that that was 70, but this is a negative 70 plus 10 equals negative 60. Well, a larger one is 70, smaller one's 10. They're opposite signs, so 70 minus 10 is 60. The larger had a negative, so it does check out. All right, I'll stop there and then I'll come back with more.